All right. Well, thank you very much, Amanda, and thank you for everybody coming and joining us today. We've been really excited about this topic and about this event. So we're going to have one more panel, and then I know it's been a little bit of a longer morning so far. We're going to have a coffee break after this. But first, we wanted to have one of the panels that we're most excited for. It's our national security panel. It's an area in a division of the government where innovation is really taking root, and there are quite a few new initiatives that are going forth. So we're excited to have our speakers, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce them. We're going to start with Molly Kane. Molly is the Department of Homeland Security Director of Venture, Innovation, and Engagement. Before Molly came to DHS, she was involved in the startup community, and she was the Executive Director of Tech Wildcatters in Dallas. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Next up, we'll have Joe Mate. Joe is the former Army Research Lab Chief Scientist. He is currently right now focusing his research on electromagnetics, but for the past 4 years until 2017, he was the Chief Scientist in charge of quite a few initiatives in terms of innovation. Next, we have Christy Monaco. She is the Chief Ventures Officer for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. She's been working in intelligence since 1990, with her career including stops at the Office of Naval Intelligence, as well as the Defense Intelligence Agency, and now is working with the National, and I'm actually going to come up as well. Let me see if I can do this without falling. All right. So thank you very much for joining us. We're excited to have you. I wanted to start with, I was able to do a bit of an introduction, but wanted to give you some time, too, to kind of talk a little bit about your program. So can we start with you, Christy?
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to Government CIO Media for hosting this event today. It's a great day. First off, I just want to say I was in Silicon Valley last week and picked up some really interesting things. One of the things I picked up was a terrible cold, so I apologize if I've got a little bit of a sniffle, and I've positioned myself in case I have a sneezing fit. So I am NGA's first Chief Ventures Officer, and in that role I'm the Director of the Office of Ventures and Innovation. And our mission is to create partnerships and steer pathways and solutions for inventing new, improving existing, inventing new, and transforming geospatial intelligence capabilities. I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar with NGA. We say NGA, people think National Governors Association or the National Gallery of Art. NGA is one of the members of the intelligence community. We are a combat support agency, so we are in both the intelligence community and the Department of Defense. And we're the people who were kind of doing things with Google Earth before Google Earth existed. We don't own the satellites, but what we own is sort of the analysis of the Earth, activities on the Earth. Our motto is know the Earth, show the way, understand the world. Within the Office of Ventures and Innovation, as I said, we're creating partnerships, so we have things like NGA outposts in Silicon Valley and Austin. We have a lot of partnership activity going on in the DC area, including the establishment of a public-private partnership where we are going to be giving broad access to NGA's geospatial data. We also have a group of folks that I think of as sort of our caddies, and they help NGA's innovators, and they help bring NGA's problem owners together with solutions, and using lean startup methodologies, move those into the system. One of the interesting things with OVI is that we have both sort of enterprise innovation activities, but we've also folded in NGA's component acquisition executive activities, bringing these two capabilities together that most people don't think, hey, those connect really well. At the end of the day, when you're acquiring something, what you're trying to do is bring in a new capability, so it made sense to us. And then finally, we have responsibility for arrangements like OTAs that were discussed earlier, other transaction authority, and cooperative R&D agreements, CRADAs, and the public-private partnership. Ways for us to be able to reach out to industry and academia and do a better job of innovating alongside our partners.
All right, Joe.
Hi, Joe Mate. I've been providing technical leadership at the Army Research Laboratory for 30 years as a researcher, but as indicated up until recently as the chief scientist. And I do want to pick up, ARL, we do foundational research. So in response to a comment that was made in the previous panel about somebody at NIH putting out something, an SBIR, there was a researcher there, a government employee, who was doing that work. And since they pulled out the iPhone, I know Eric Fossum, and I can rightfully say that my research DNA is in the optics of the camera that is in here. So we really look far out. I'm listening to people talk about innovation, but in research, you really have to be thinking far, far ahead. So, for example, if we had not started looking at autonomous vehicles in the mid-90s, there would not have been a DARPA Grand Challenge. There would not be all the hype about autonomous vehicles. We were looking at that in the mid-90s. Now, we do foundational research, but we recognize that just working in a laboratory is not enough. We need to interact with our colleagues, and we actually want the technologies that we're working on, for example, this, to transition. So collaboration has been in our DNA since the establishment of the Army Research Laboratory. In 1995, we established a program called Federated Labs that was a government, industry, and academia partnership. It is now called a Collaborative Research Alliance, but we have continued that for over 20 years. Now, the world has changed in those 20 years, and in 2013, our new director, Tom Russell, wanted us to take a deliberate look at our collaborative efforts. We developed some strategic initiatives. One of those that I led was to identify our essential research areas. For the entire time that I had been at ARL, we did not have a strategic vision for our research. Now I can tell you what our essential research areas are. At the same time, we developed a program called Open Campus, and that was to do the things that we had been doing, but to do it in a strategic way. Basically, to tell the outside community that we are open for business, that we are interested in collaborating both as partners on the research, but also on the tech transfer. And last year, the Defense Science Board highlighted ARL's Open Campus as an innovation exemplar.
Okay. Molly?
Right when I take a drink.
Good time.
I'm Molly Kane. I'm the Director of Venture and Innovation for Homeland Security, and I, too, am in the first role that they've had there. I was recruited out of Austin, and I was giving a loudmouth talk to some government feds who I had no idea who they were. And at the end of the breakfast, they offered me a job, and I said no, because why? And 3 weeks later, over a Tex-Mex dinner, they came back, convinced me of the mission, and the rest is history. So I've been with Homeland for about a year and a half now. Our program is still in its fledgling stage, but one of the biggest things, and I'll piggyback on both of you guys, it's the implementation of innovation, and that's what we say is our mission. And there's no shortage of amazing R&D projects, but we don't want them to live on the shelf. We want them to plug in. We want them to be used by our front line, and so that's the main priority. And then, piggybacking on what you said, is I like to lovingly call it mission matching. So I sit down with our CIOs and discuss with them, what are your missions today? What are your missions tomorrow? And let's talk about what you might not know. Tell me your mission now, and then let me introduce you to a venture guy who can tell you that you need to be looking at something 10 years out. So that's a little bit of what we do.
Okay. Well, this question is for Christy and Molly. I wanted to start, you guys are starting new positions, within your agencies, and a lot of it has to do with the outreach to places like Silicon Valley and some of the venture firms out there. So I was wondering if the relationships that you guys have been able to develop with the venture capital firms have been productive, or have they been in some ways created more challenges going forward?
I love talking to the venture capital firms because the decision processes that they go through to decide in whom to invest are very similar to the decision processes that we put into deciding what capabilities to bring into NGA. And one of the things that VCs have done for us that's been particularly useful has been introducing us to companies who might be able to leverage the geospatial data. We have petabytes of geospatial data that is basically sitting waiting to be exploited for development of things like AI algorithms and computer vision. So VCs are filling a really interesting kind of matchmaking space for us in that regard.
Molly?
So the Fortune 500 world has leaned into venture for quite some time, as all of you know, and there's no shortage of awareness of what Homeland Security does. So that's easy for me. Everybody knows what TSA and FEMA and Secret Service, they know what their main priority missions are. So the venture guys, they roll up into our office and they say, I've got these 3 companies you've got to know about, and they know exactly what we're hunting for without us asking for it. So it's a really beautiful way to engage that relationship. And then there's no shortage of startups, and the best part of this job is that they deliver the use cases for me, and that helps me sell it to our guys. So if they can explain it to me in a layman's format that this is why FEMA needs to know me, I can tell FEMA the same thing. So it's a wonderful relationship.
Wonderful. Joe, you mentioned the Open Campus program, but I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about that. I think it's one of the more exciting programs that exist right now within the government, and I don't think enough people know about it, quite frankly. Could you talk a little bit about what that means and maybe how you picked where to establish, or not you specifically, but the Army Research Lab picked the Open Campus programs to go? Because I know one just opened in Boston, is that correct?
It will be, yes. Open Campus, where it came from, the notion is, as I said, we are open for business. What the thinking was, looking back toward 9/11 and how we responded to that, the focus was on security. We were still interested in collaboration, but if we're collaborating with universities and where universities have a large number of foreign graduate students, coming in through the front gate is very intimidating when you have to go through all that security. And what happened was we were slowly retreating behind large walls, the service laboratories. While we were doing that, the world was globalizing. And what we recognized is if we continued this way, the labs would continue to do relevant work, but would it really be cutting edge? We needed to be connected to the outside world to know what's on the leading edge. To do that, we had to get rid of some of those physical barriers, and we had to let people know we are open to collaboration. So there is still a guard at the front gate, but we have implemented processes inside the laboratory so that if we're working with a professor who has a foreign student, a foreign national as a student, they go through a vetting process, but now with the appropriate badge, they walk into the building just like everybody else. They're working with our staff, they have access to the building, not complete access, and this lowers the threshold. People see that it is easy to work with us. So that's inviting people in. What we've also done is we've pushed our people out. The labs through BRAC, we are primarily located at Aberdeen Proving Ground and at Adelphi, Maryland, and our director wanted our people to get out. And we now have what we call our extended sites. This is actually the anti-BRAC. We have ARL West in Los Angeles, ARL South in Austin, ARL Northwest in Chicago, and as mentioned, we just opened up ARL Northeast. And we have, these are not just offices, this is laboratory space. We have people who are there on site. The first site that we chose was Los Angeles because of, looking at information, human information interaction. Being in Los Angeles was actually a better place than being up in Silicon Valley. That's where the talent was. And it's one thing to, somebody who has lived in that area to try to convince them to come to the East Coast is difficult. So we go out there. Austin is attractive because of the venture capital environment. Our original reasons for looking at Chicago were some facilities from the Department of the Energy, and Boston was also a very natural one given the schools, given the venture capital, the small companies that are out there. So we have people that are now outside of Maryland who are interacting, and in fact, we have been pushing our people to think internationally. We have sent people to universities overseas, so it's not just domestic.
I think
Great.
he actually nailed it on the head with the Silicon Valley is a concept now. It's not just in this one little pocket of Mountain View, California. The taxes are more attractive in Texas. Whoop. But DC needs early stage technology. They need tech talent, or we need tech talent. And little pockets of America everywhere are popping up, and the venture capital guys see that, so they're investing in it. So.
Well, yeah, and Christy, you mentioned outposts. How is NGA picking some of those outposts? In fact, I think NGA's got a unique program in Huntsville, Alabama, which a lot of folks wouldn't really think of as being a real center for technology, but you guys have really developed that area, that tech hotbed there.
Right. So we have outposts right now in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas, and actually we're getting ready to grow our Austin, Texas outpost. The Huntsville relationship you mentioned is really more of a relationship that has been built over time, focused on what we and the city of Huntsville can do to cooperate, create a partnership around disaster relief. It's sort of one of those things that you can kind of put in place ahead of time, and that way, God forbid something happens in Huntsville, we've got that relationship already there. One of the things I did want to jump on was the idea of we've got the outposts that are sort of NGA's ambassadors out. But one of the programs that NGA is putting into place is something called the Explorer program. The idea behind this is you can come work at NGA, but you might not actually need to physically come work at NGA. We're seeking, because a lot of the folks in Silicon Valley, what they want to do is work on the nation's really hard problems. And my golly, NGA has really tough challenges to work through, and a very, very compelling mission. So what we're creating is this program that says, hey, stay where you are, but telework in with NGA. There's a lot that can be done with, even though we're an intelligence agency, a lot of work that we can do at the unclassified or FOUO level. So we're looking at ways to hire what we're calling these explorers. They could potentially stay in place and work on some of our hard problems. Hire them for maybe as like a term employee for just a couple of years. And then when they leave NGA, we think of it kind of like Peace Corps for NGA. When they leave NGA, and then they go to either create their own startup because they've gained insight about some of the nation's national security problems, or they want to go back and do something else with their career, they have something that differentiates themselves from all of their other peers who may have stayed in Silicon Valley and continue to work on traffic routing algorithms or name your AI for a larger company in Silicon Valley.
I'm actually that employee. For the first year and a half, I've been based everywhere that's not DC, and that's what they told me when they interviewed me. We don't want you to get Fed head. And so I don't live here. and I tried to buy that URL, and it's not available.
Not even-
But I'm relocating now because our department is actually growing and it's necessary. But I've got a team on the ground here, and then it's either California or New York or Texas or Alabama. Birmingham is hot right now with tech, but it's everywhere. So we shouldn't just shop here. Is kind of the concept.
Well, speaking of Texas, you just returned from South by Southwest last week, and I was asking you what stood out for you from going through that, and you mentioned robotic process automation. Tell me why.
I am nerding out on that topic right now. Everybody is talking about AI, and I think these two are probably farther advanced on AI than Homeland Security is, but and there are absolutely sectors of Homeland Security that have embraced it and are using it quite wisely. But if you go one step back, that's machine learning, and you go another step back, and that's robotic process automation. Everything you hear about in the press about the government, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, is slow and crappy process on everything. And it takes me like 6 months to get paid back for a dinner. And that's so aggravating. So now I just pay for my own dinners. But there's so much that we can do. And I actually target the projects that our executives say, we need more resources, we need more human bodies and seats. And I'm like, that's perfect for RPA. So that's what we're tackling right now. It's not a job replacer. The best description that I got recently was it's taking the robot out of the human. So if you've got anybody in your department that is monotonously ruining their life with a button pressing, that's the perfect project. So that's what we're trying to tackle that and save millions of dollars with it.
Great. Joe, we talked a little bit about tech transfer, and that's been something that the Army Research Lab has been trying to do really well. For those who don't know, tech transfer, the idea is really take the research that the Army has been invested in, take that IP or intellectual property, and then allow entrepreneurs or businesses turn that into actual products or gear on the battlefield. So, Joe, can you talk a little bit about how Army Research Lab is trying to do a better job with that?
Definitely. Good example of that is the IP store that we now have. It's on the website. I have that address. I haven't committed it to memory. But what we have done is we have placed patents that are ARLs, and it's basically like going shopping. It's an automated process, and you can say, I'm interested in licensing this intellectual property. There's some boilerplate about the licensing agreement. This has been open since October of 2016. We have had 4 agreements that have been processed that way. I'm here to advertise that it is out there. And that's one of the things that I said, we looked at our outreach and our collaborative efforts from a strategic standpoint, and one of the things that we have really put a lot of effort into is establishing strategic CRADAs. I understand that this is probably an industry audience, but we have approached universities in a strategic way, saying, we'll do an umbrella CRADA with you. This is a cooperative research and development agreement, and once we have that established, all the IP, all of the legal agreements have been agreed upon. And then if I know somebody at Virginia Tech and I want to start a project, all we have to do is agree on what that project is. Now, we have about 180 partners, CRADA partners. There are about 360 projects. Half of those partners are academia, half of those partners are industry, but we have, over the past 4 years, the growth in our CRADAs has increased exponentially because we're going out and we are attempting to be strategic in working with partners outside.
So one of the things about CRADAs because we're growing the number of CRADAs that we do as well, and one of the things that I think is very interesting, about CRADAs is that we approach a lot of startups about CRADAs and say, look, we know that for you guys, that for a startup company, R&D is a very capital-intensive activity. And you can sort of buy down the cost on your own R&D by partnering with us to do some collaborative R&D, save your capital for something else that you may need it for, and at the same time, start to build your track record with the federal government so that when you're ready to compete for an opportunity, you've got a past performance history. Being able to speak to startups in the language that they understand about these kinds of novel relationships is, I think, one of those voids that offices like ours are filling.
It's definitely.
I was going to say, because we are a research laboratory, we have had startups on site, and in fact, we are looking at building in Adelphi a separate building across from the main lab where there would be space that we would invite them, and you'd say, you can be here, puts you in proximity to us. We already have a company on site at Aberdeen looking at additive manufacturing.
So one of the topics in the news right now is clearances, security clearances specifically, and that is something that, when people think of national security, they think of classifications, clearances, and what have you. It almost seems like there's an overclassification problem. Everything is classified secret at this point. How, in terms of attracting startups, attracting new companies, attracting tech companies that might be outside of the government, how do your agencies kind of deal with that issue?
I'll jump in. I mean, when people think of the DoD, that's immediately what they think about. Oh, classification. I work for ARL. Oh, everything you do must be classified. The truth is, all of my work has been published out in the open. We are a fundamental research laboratory. So if you're coming in on the ground floor, you cannot classify basic research, 6.1. So that's actually the entree. We're open. As you move toward an application, then things get darker, but we are attracting people because we do basic research, which is not classified.
I was having this conversation with an accelerator just yesterday that it's actually a big myth that startups don't know that the government, and I'm not trying to contradict him on stage, but I'm about to, that the government is open for business. It's actually that they have no idea how the hell to work with us. They think they're competing with IBM, so then it's much easier to go to Toyota, and they don't want to get into that hairy situation that is always talked about of, oh my God, the government has paperwork and this and this and this. That part's true, but we deal with that. It's pretty simple on their end. They just wait forever. So, yeah.
And I do want to say, I understand what the impressions are. I mean, what we do is we recognize we have partners. We want our partners to succeed. We are open. We will make it easy for these people to work with us. That's part of that strategic change.
Yeah, the collaborative conversation that and that's what our office is trying to do as well, is let us tell you in real, regular language that this is actually what we're asking for. Skip all 400 pages of that solicitation, and here's one sentence. We need Microsoft 365. Something simple like that. And that's the conversation that we keep having with startups is just ask questions, and then also listen to us whenever we're out on the streets and talking about it. They don't know that we're also regular businesses. We need HR services, we need health services, we need shipping services, we need pins, we need all kinds of things. So they kind of forget that part.
And for us, it's about translating intelligence use cases into commercial use cases. And with geospatial data being the backbone of so many of the apps that we use and so many programs, we actually can leverage really well, particularly our folks in the outposts, who are in fact, our outpost in Silicon Valley has people who don't work directly for me. They work for their home directorate. So I've got somebody from our analysis directorate and somebody from our source directorate. They are real practitioners of geospatial intelligence, so they understand the problems in an intelligence context and both speak the language of Silicon Valley and are gifted in translating use needs from more of like a classified use case to a commercial use case.
I think, can I pipe in one more? I think one of the big things, and I know that our offices of venture that are opening up are actually creating a more collaborative society within our organizations. We recently launched I'm going to say it the right way, Emerging Citizen Tech Council, and that's hosted by GSA, but it's chaired by Homeland Security, I think National Archives, State Department. We meet monthly, and there are over 200 participants and organizations, state, local, and federal. You guys are both in it. I don't know if you knew that. Your people are in it, and they're wonderful. But it is a sharing across the table, because when a startup asks me a question and it's not a fit for me, I need to refer both of their programs. And we are actually turning DC into more of a Silicon Valley in that respect. They do swap deals across the table that way, and we should be doing that more often. So that's the cool thing about our offices opening.
Absolutely. I think we have a chance for one or two questions. If you don't mind just waiting for a microphone, if you could raise your hand. All right, Camille?
This is actually a question for Christy. NGA also has really innovative approaches to bring talent in from the outside. Pre-vetted candidates come to NGA for a half a day or whole day, and they work together in a group setting to solve problems. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Trading microphones up here. So I spoke earlier about the Explorer program, which is our program to bring folks in on the Peace Corps for NGA. We've also are doing things like challenges and hackathons that many of the organizations that are similar to us are doing. We've got a challenge going on right now, and I won't steal the DIUX's thunder. I know they're up shortly, but
There are two panels later.
yes, but the ask them about it. The XView challenge, which is a challenge where we have basically released something like 1 million basically bounded box structured observations on commercial imagery about covering kind of 60 different data classes in over 1,400 square kilometers of the Earth. This is basically an immense training set to allow companies to participate in this challenge, and through DIUX, if they win the challenge, they win something, I think it's like $100K or credits on AWS. So looking at those unique ways to, without actually having to come to work at NGA, work on NGA's problems.
We had a question in the back.
Good morning, Kevin Cummins with PSC. Earlier, there was talk about CRADAs and OTA, other transaction authority, for bringing the innovation and buying it, the government buying the innovation. OTA is traditionally used for R&D prototyping, although DoD does have production authority. Other agencies don't necessarily have that. Can you talk a little bit about how, once something's been identified, whether it's a startup or something that the government is helping prototype with a private partner, about ingesting that technology, and if you could speak to that.
So NGA's OTA is brand new. We awarded our first OTA agreement in December. What is really interesting, what's really interesting about the fact that the OTA that we awarded in December is leveraging this authority, but it's for a project called Project Sagittarius, which is an AI development using data and using commercial algorithms and government-developed algorithms to do some object detection, basically. And Project Sagittarius was a project that came up as sort of an intrapreneur challenge. So NGA has something called the NGA Innovation Experience, where we are, and shout out to Alexis earlier, who talked about tapping into the talent that's within. We've got this experience that is saying, hey, you guys have some great ideas. Let's surface them, and we nurture these programs through Lean Startup. As part of nurturing Project Sagittarius, we said, hey, our OTA is a great venue for you to get the AI that you need. So that's ongoing. And then what we're doing in the meantime is looking down the road, partnering that project with our program offices to say, hey, this is coming for, this is in your mission space and it's coming for you. Let's make sure that down the road, when it's time to integrate it, let's assume this pilot or this prototype succeeds, and let's start planning now for the integration of that.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the time we had for this panel discussion. We're now going to have a 10-minute coffee break and lavatory break. For those that don't know, the bathrooms are downstairs. The men's and women's rooms are downstairs. We have coffee back there, and we'd like to just kick off in about 10 minutes or so. We got 3 more panels. We're all very excited for them. So thank you very much to the speakers here.
Thank you.
And keep on going.